Hi, and welcome to the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the How to Communicate Without Shutting Down or Blowing Up episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I coach men who are rebuilding their lives after breakup or divorce, helping them understand their relationship patterns, grow into the best version of themselves, and create deeper love and real connection, showing up differently for the next chapter of their lives, so they can live the life they love. So, what if the biggest problem in your relationship wasn't the conflict itself, but how you responded to it? Because a lot of men do one of two things when their emotions get tense. We either shut down or we blow up. Yeah, we withdraw, avoid, internalize, and disconnect, right? Or we react, get defensive, we attack, raise our voice, yell, push people away. And the hard truth, neither creates safety and neither creates connection. And neither helps love grow. But here's the good news, man. Communication is a skill. And like any skill, it can be learned. And that's what I'll be talking about. One of the most important relationship skills most men were never taught is how to communicate without shutting down or blowing up. You see, communication isn't just about talking. It's about emotional regulation. It's about having self-awareness, creating safety and connection, and learning how to respond instead of react. Research from Dr. John Gottman consistently shows that how couples handle conflict is one of the strongest predictors of relationship success or failure. And it's not the absence of disagreement that matters most, it's whether two people can stay emotionally connected while working through it. And for a lot of men, that's where things fall apart. And this topic hits home for me personally. Because earlier in my life, I would lean much more towards shutting down, I'd say, than blowing up. Every once in a while, if I felt cornered or criticized, man, I'd get really defensive and I'd push back hard. And honestly, afterwards, usually I felt like crap. I felt shame about it because I knew it wasn't who I wanted to be. But more often, my pattern was to internalize, meaning I'd disconnect emotionally. I'd get quiet, or I would try to, manage it internally on my own, pretend I was okay when I wasn't. And while shutting down may seem calmer on the surface than, exploding, it still creates distance. Yeah, it still leaves your partner feeling alone, feeling unheard, unseen, disconnected. And eventually, resentment can build on both sides. Now, what changed everything for me was learning mindfulness practices, especially acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT for short, and along with mindful communication strategies. Yeah, using those two, man, that was the game changer. Because for the first time, I learned there was another option. I didn't have to react automatically from my old programming, my old conditioning. I could just pause, notice what I was feeling, allow that discomfort to be there without letting it control me. And then I could choose how I wanted to respond. Now, in theory, that sounds great, yet it took a lot of practice. But doing that created a shift that changed my relationships. And honestly, it changed my life. Yeah, because I learned how to communicate in a way that felt empowering instead of reactive, right? I felt grounded instead of defensive. And I felt connected instead of disconnected. And man, that's a completely different experience. So why do men shut down or blow up? Well, most men were never taught emotional regulation. And we were taught things like, you got to be strong, don't be weak, got to push through it, don't cry, handle it yourself, that kind of thing. But nobody really taught us how to sit with our uncomfortable emotions, how to communicate and be vulnerable, how to stay present during conflict or an argument, how to regulate our nervous system, right? Or even how to repair when there's a disconnect. So when conflict or an argument happens, our nervous system often defaults to our survival mode. Some men's survival mode is to fight. Some run, some freeze, and some just shut down emotionally. And usually those patterns started way before adulthood. And I go back to attachment theory. It shows that a lot of our adult conflict patterns are rooted in early emotional experiences and the mechanisms we learned in order to cope. But the problem is what protected us emotionally at one point in our lives, that survival, right? It often gets in the way of or damages intimacy later in life. I think about a client who I'll call Kendre. Kendre was the complete opposite of me. He didn't shut down. And when I say blew up, I mean he would react with a temper tantrum like a toddler sometimes. But here's what was interesting. At the beginning of every relationship, he'd be calm, cool, collected, and confident, right? Everything looked great until that conflict stage came in. When conflict entered the relationship, he would suddenly get defensive. He would raise his voice and yell. He would react impulsively. He would say things that he would regret later, and things would escalate instead of calming down and connecting. And rarely he would repair after he blew up. Well, eventually his partners would get sick of him and leave. Not because they didn't care about him, but because they couldn't tolerate the emotional volatility. Well, the good news was that Kendre recognized his pattern. And honestly, that was huge, man, because awareness is where change begins. And he came to me wanting to figure it out. He was like, Bill, what do I do with this? And that's where the real challenge started. At first, he was resistant. Like a lot of men, he wanted techniques and skills before self-awareness. He wanted quick fixes before doing the emotional work. But slowly, he started opening up. We began working with ACT principles and mindful communication practices. We focused on getting clear about the kind of man he wanted to be, identifying his values, learning how to pause before reacting. We focused on naming what he was actually feeling, understanding his triggers. We worked on regulating his nervous system and practicing language that created connection instead of distance. And little by little, things did start to change. Then Kendre started dating a woman who I'll call Carrie, and he really liked her, which meant the stakes suddenly felt real for him. At first, he practiced these skills with the small stuff, the disagreements about movies or opinions or little misunderstandings. But eventually came the real test, and that was when one night he showed up an hour and a half late for a date. No text, no call, and the question was, why? He was stuck in traffic and his phone died. No charger. Now, the old Kendre would have exploded defensively the moment Carrie got upset. But this time, something different happened. He told me he felt the reaction coming up in his body. The defensiveness, that urge to attack back. But instead of reacting automatically, he was able to catch himself. He paused, took a deep breath, and grounded himself. Then he responded calmly, not perfect, not robotically, but intentionally. And because of that, Carrie stayed open too. And instead of turning into a massive emotional blow-up, they were actually able to talk it through and reconnect. Now listen, it didn't always go perfectly after that. Sometimes the old patterns crept in, which is very common. But now Kendre had skills. And when mistakes would happen, he could actually repair them. And man, that's growth. Not perfection, just repair. And that's huge. And that repair work, honestly, that's one of the healthiest relationship skills anyone can develop. Now, I don't know whether Kendre and Carrie are still together today, but what matters most is this. Now he has the tools no matter who he's with. So you see how I worked with Kendre, who would blow up, and how I stopped shutting down. Now I'm going to break it down and show you how to stop doing neither one. And the first is to learn to pause before you react. Sounds simple, right? And it's incredibly powerful. Acceptance commitment therapy teaches us that our thoughts and emotions don't have to dictate our behavior. Yeah, you can notice what's happening, saying to yourself, "Oh, I'm getting triggered right now," without acting from it immediately. Yeah, even taking one conscious deep breath can interrupt that old subconscious pattern. And that pause gives you a chance to choose. Your choice. Choosing from the man you want to be rather than reacting from your old patterns. Next is name or identify what you're feeling. And I know it's tough for a lot of guys, but the research says that when you label emotions, it helps to regulate the nervous system. So instead of pointing the finger and saying, "You're pissing me off," try saying something like a nice statement, like, "I feel hurt," or "I'm overwhelmed," or "I'm feeling really defensive right now." That's what's real. And that creates awareness instead of escalating into something worse. Another thing is to focus on your values. Not trying to win or to be right, but what's important to you. And again, it's asking yourself, what kind of man do I want to be in this moment? Calm, respectful, connected, honest, grounded? Well, these values give you directions when your emotions get all fired up and get in your way. So focus on what's important to you, your values. Another thing is to slow down your language, and you can do this through mindful communication. And what that sounds like, if you're in an argument or things get a little heated, is to say stuff like, "Well, help me understand, tell me more." Or, "Hey, can we just slow this down a little bit here?" You could say something like, "I want us to work through this." Or, "I'm getting really charged right now." Or, "Oh, that landed really hard for me. I want to hear what you have to say. I just need a minute. I don't want to disconnect." So you can see the difference, right, with mindful communication. That language creates connection instead of this emotional warfare or creating all this distance. It actually helps you connect, especially when it gets hard. And the final thing I'll mention is repair. Yeah, man, repair, and do it quickly. Because the truth is, you will mess up sometimes. That's a fact. We all do. So understand that healthy communication is not about perfection. Okay, we're gonna mess up. So it's about being able to repair when we do. So a real sincere or genuine, "I'm sorry," or, "that wasn't fair," or, "I reacted instead of listening." Or you could say, "Hey, can we do a restart with this?" Something like that. When you repair that way, it can completely change the trajectory of the relationship. All right, so here's what I want you to take away with this. The goal is not to become emotionless. The goal is to become emotionally responsible. And there's a difference. You don't have to suppress your emotions, and you don't have to explode with them either. You can learn to stay present, communicate honestly, regulate yourself, and create safety even during difficult moments. That's what emotionally healthy communication looks like. And man, it changes everything. And if you want more support on how to communicate in a healthy way and other resources for rebuilding yourself and creating healthier relationships, then head over to my website, manonthepathtolove.com. Again, manonthepathtolove.com. Okay, it is time for my quote of the week. And it's from the late psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl. He says, quote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response." Unquote. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And that will do it for another episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, the How to Communicate Without Shutting Down or Blowing Up episode. My name is Bill Simpson. Thank you for listening. Now, next time on the Men on the Path to Love, I continue my series on building a healthy relationship, talking about emotional safety in relationship. And here's the question I want you to think about. Do the people closest to you feel emotionally safe with you? And do you feel emotionally safe with them? That question can change a relationship. Please join me for the Emotional Safety, the Skill That Changes Everything episode. And if you got something meaningful out of this episode and you know someone who may need to hear it, then please share the link and share the love. And until next time, keep your heart open and stay on the path to love.